Chapter the Third. Miss Letitia Glover sat speechless and visibly struggling against tears. Whether more of relief or of consternation, I could not tell. Sherlock strode past her, opened the front door, bellowed, "Mrs. Hudson, hot water!" Then, without another word, disappeared into his bedroom. I applied myself to comforting Miss Glover, pulling my chair closer to hers, passing her a dainty handkerchief scented with lavender, and attempting to say something kind while succeeding only in being blunt and awkward. "You are caught in such a muddle. You must feel as if your head might explode." Handkerchief to her face, Miss Glover nodded fervidly. "Let us make a list, shall we, and see whether we can sort your problem out at all." Turning to a fresh page of tablet paper and reading each line aloud as I penciled it, I wrote, "Ashes are probably those of a large dog. Can we therefore assume Flossie is alive? If so, why did Cadogan Rudcliffe attempt to deceive his sister-in-law? How many other people has he deceived, and again, why? If he is involved in some plot involving his wife's disappearance, what is its object? How did his first wife meet her demise? Where is Flossie, and what has happened to her, if she still lives? How can we find out?" I stared at that final question for some time. Miss Glover surprised me by speaking up calmly. "I should write to Caddy. All too appropriate a nickname, as it begins to appear he truly is a cad." "But you will not yet betray that sentiment to him." "No, I will address him as dearest Caddy, and sign my name, Tish, and ask questions about my sister's supposed demise, requesting details." "Excellent." My brother's voice turned our heads. Exiting his bedroom, he walked towards us, impeccably washed, shaven, combed, and dressed in a tweed suit for traveling. Standing over us, he bowed slightly to read the list in my lap, then nodded in cool approval. "How to find out is indeed the salient problem," he said with no worse than his usual condescension, "as I must do so without exciting suspicion." "We," I corrected him. If he thought he was going to take over this case just because it had gotten him up off the settee, he was sorely mistaken. "I take it you're going to Surrey? I intend to start in Belvedere." I'm sure I puzzled him, for he turned to me with eyebrows raised, but before I could explain, Miss Glover spoke up in the manner of a shy person facing an unpleasant matter. "Mr. Holmes, your fee." He turned to her and made his most gracious bow. "I shall accept none, as I greeted you, or rather failed to greet you, in so unmannerly a fashion when you came in. Your problem has features of interest, Miss Glover, and I will give it my fullest attention. Have you a photograph of your sister?" Apparently she did, for she bent to reach into her reticule. This interlude gave me opportunity to rise, retrieve my gloves, and make for the door. "Sherlock," I called back over my shoulder, "you may contact me through my club, and I will contact you through Mrs. Hudson. Au revoir." Quitting the premises before he could argue, I ran down the stairs in high spirits. A few hours later, looking quite the lady in a teal-blue traveling outfit, complete with tastefully matching hat, I exited the Belvedere train station and headed towards Basilweather Park at a brisk walk, breathing deeply in appreciation of air invisible to the eye, unlike that of London. Within moments, I reached the long drive that led to Basilweather Hall, where I promenaded beneath a leafy archway of old lime trees, greatly enjoying their green-scented shade and my bucolic, sootless surroundings. Half in a dream, I heard the soft thud of hooves on grass, yet noticed the sound only in afterthought, so to speak, when an elegant horse and rider cantered out from between the tree trunks directly in front of me. My presence caused the horse to shy violently, as horses will when they discover something unexpected beneath their long noses. The rider, to his credit, kept his seat and brought his mount to a swerving halt, facing me. His spotless jodhpurs and boots, cutaway jacket, and silk topper almost disguised him as a tall, grown man, but not quite. He had shot up, but not yet filled out since the last time I had seen him, a year before. I saw him to be all hands and elbows, and sandy hair unruly beneath his hat. Rather hotly, as was understandable, he challenged me. "Miss, what are you doing here, on private land?" "Why, hello to you too, Tukey. and rather than giving him a maidenly simper, I grinned at him. His jaw dropped. He leapt off his horse, strode to me, and shook my hand most warmly, all before he managed to speak. "You!" he gasped. "Enola Holmes, at your service, Viscount Tewkesbury, Marquess of Basilweather." "So at last I get to know your name." "Indeed, Tukey." I had concealed it previously only to evade my brothers. On the same day that I had run away from home, coincidentally, Tukey had done the same, and we had met, most misfortunately, both of us bound hand and foot, captured for ransom by cutthroats. "Don't call me Tukey." But he laughed out loud as he said it. "Still rocking the boat, aren't you?" In my efforts to use my corset stays to cut the twine binding my wrists, I had quite literally rocked the boat in which we had been held prisoner. "And I can see that you are still masquerading as a grown-up." "As are you. Why are you not off at some exclusive boarding school?" "I told my parents I would run away from any boarding school, so I have tutors." He gave a whimsical smile. "They let me do much as I please, so long as I promise not to run away again. And you? Still gadding about with a small fortune, taking the place of a bosom?" He actually made me blush. "Lord Tewkesbury," I protested. "Please don't mind. I am far too delighted to be proper. I never imagined I would ever see you again." Looping one arm through his horse's reins in order to lead it, he offered me the other arm like a gentleman. "What are you doing here, Enola?" The way I took his arm was ladylike, but the way I answered was too candid for anyone's usual lady. "I came in search of illuminating gossip." I imagined my brother Sherlock was doing exactly the same by loitering in some Surrey pub, most likely impersonating a working man, with a beard on his face and a cap pulled down over his eyes, perhaps managing to steer the conversation towards skeletons in the closet of the Earl of Dunhenge. Here at Basilweather Park, with my hand on Tukey's arm, I was pursuing the same end in a different way. My previous acquaintance with Viscount Tewkesbury, Marquess of Basilweather, and the camaraderie we had shared for a few days on the run after joining forces to escape the cutthroats, gave me an entree to the aristocratic gossip rather than that of gardeners and servants. It would be interesting to see which might prove more useful. "Gossip?" Tukey exclaimed as we walked. "About whom?" "Ah, that is exactly the problem. I must neither divulge that information nor let you guess it. Indeed, I must beg you to keep my nefarious purpose a secret." "Grand and dandy." Still boyish, despite the fact that he was now taller than I, he laughed again. "Enola, you are a brick." And then, as we rounded a curve in the drive and Basilweather Hall came into view, he asked, "How long can you stay?" "That depends." "On gossip? Wouldn't you rather go horseback riding with me?" I would far, far rather have gone horseback riding. But honor forbade. I was, first and foremost, a professional perditorian. Just as my brother, Sherlock, bore the distinction of being the world's first private consulting detective, I titled myself the world's first scientific perditorian, a finder of that which was lost. Having a client who was relying on me to find her sister, alive, it was to be hoped, I turned my back on the seductive outdoors, mounted Basilweather Hall's broad marble steps, advanced between Grecian pillars, and plied the heavy ram's head knocker on the massive front door. The butler who responded, expressionless as all of them were, nevertheless managed to look askance at my lack of a carriage, or an accompanying footman, showing me into a front parlor to wait, taking my card upon his silver tray, and disappearing with it into the depths of the mansion. Surely he expected his mistress to be not at home, but I had written on the card a single enigmatic sentence: "We have met before." Surely the Duchess's curiosity would prevail. And yes, the butler returned to show me in, revealing a certain inscrutable degree of astonishment. The Duchess awaited me in a conservatory boudoir, its bay windows filled with potted plants, its furnishings luxurious, almost Parisian. At first, seated with dignity on a divan, the Duchess gasped when she saw me and arose, hurrying towards me with open arms. "Your Grace!" I exclaimed in protest, startled into an actual curtsy, which turned out to be an awkward maneuver in my modish skirt, narrow, as was now the fashion. Her Grace, Tewkesbury's mother, wore a flounced and gathered gown that artfully flouted fashion. as was the prerogative of a duchess. All of its colors and textures, pale blue moire taffeta, blue-gray syrah, lavender voile, conspired to complement the smooth silver-white wings of her hair above her fair and surprisingly youthful face. I would not have recognized her as the woman I had glimpsed last year, a wild-haired woman running half mad, her face harrowed by tears of terror for her kidnapped son. "I did not think you would remember me," I blurted. "Not very clearly," she agreed cheerfully, sweeping me into her elegant arms. "But I know who you are, and what you have done for Tukey and me. And I could not be more delighted to meet you." She released me from a surprisingly strong hug. "Please, sit down and tell me all about yourself." And so I did, over tea with marmalade tarts for the next couple of hours. But, gentle reader, please forgive me, a great deal of what I told her were fibs and fictions. I affirmed that I was the younger sister of the great Sherlock Holmes, the world's first and only private consulting detective. But, as Sherlock had never made public his birthplace and almost certainly never would, there was no risk in my telling her we came from Surrey. And I exalted our family onto the fringes of the peerage, tilting our father as a knight, Sir Lucretius Adolphus Holmes, while my mother's cousin was a baronet. I said I had gone to a boarding school, naming one so prestigious it served as a portal into high society. One of the alumnae, if only I could remember names, she had married an earl. "The Earl of Dunhenge, dear?" Yes, I quite believed that was correct. "Caddy Redcliffe. I've known him since he was in short pants, my dear Enola, and I must say he sowed his wild oats with the best of them, and there was a bit of a shadow over the marriage. The girl was Mizella Haskell, of the St. John's Haskells." "Ah, I was to learn about one of Caddy's earlier wives, not Flossie." "Very respectable people, the Haskells, but quite scandalized, as were Caddy's relations. I did not attend the wedding, for it was private." I blushed in genuine shock as I began to understand. "But I heard she was quite lovely," added her Grace, charitably, "and of course a man of such rank needn't marry every girl he gets in trouble, so perhaps it was all right. She gave him 2 darling children, a girl and a boy, but most unfortunately they both expired. Of diphtheria, you know, and not long afterwards she also passed away." I expressed consternation, noted that the loss of the children to diphtheria is sad, but commonplace. Often it has been known to take a family's entire brood. Then inquired as to the cause of Mizella's demise. "I don't know, dear, and I can't at all understand why or how it should have been a scandal, but it was treated like one. There was no funeral. She was cremated. Can you imagine?"